All right. Hey guys, I am going to make this as quick as possible because I know a lot of you guys have a lot to do. And I feel like this chapter covered a ton. And I loved every bit of it. First and foremost, feel free to unmute yourself if you want to pop in or if you can relate to anything or want to speak of anything that really stood out to you in the book of this chapter, chapter 2. And also, we're just taking this book really, really slow. If also, Kelsey, if you don't know me and you're not part of Plexus and you're doing this book study with us, but we're taking this book really, really slow. We're doing it chapter by a week so that we can just spend a little bit more time being more intimate and just chatting like this on Thursdays with all of you guys. So that brings me to, if you also want to lead a call, let us know. We have a few spots open at the end after some of us leaders go through and lead each chapter. But if you feel called by this book to lead a chapter like I'm doing tonight, let us know and we would love to let you do that. So what I love about this book is that it's also, I feel like it's basically like a devotional too. She ties in a lot of verses, a lot of scripture, and it also ties into the book of Ruth. So I've learned a lot, which prior to reading this book, I didn't know anything about the book of Ruth. So I'm learning right along with Nikki, the author of this book, and by reading the book of Ruth. So I'm just loving it. So I'm going to start. I'm just going to kind of briefly go over some things that stood out to me. And like I said, if you guys want to pop in and say how you felt or if something stood out to you, feel free, please. Okay. So chapter 2, we're going to go over tonight, the refinement redefined. So I'm first going to start by just saying that definition because I kept going back to it as I started this chapter. I'm like, what does this mean? Like, what are the words? And for me to process it that's just something I have to do to really understand it. So refinement means to improve, make small changes and touch up. So then I just kind of wrote that underneath there. And then redefined means again or differently. Okay. So how many times would it take for someone to tell you no before you quit? And I kind of related this to Plexus. Like, how many times do we reach out to people and we get a no, and we get a no, and we get a no? I was that person when Marissa on here messaged me. She messaged me like 8 times, maybe even more before I finally said yes. And so how many times, like, what if she would have just given up on me and taken the no as, all right, she said no, adios, And so if that's you, I hope after reading this book, you will no longer take no for an answer. So I'm gonna go on to the next page. I put a heart around this little quote. I thought this little box, but it says, we often discount what God is doing because we are determined to go our own way. So this was totally me and my family a few months ago. I will tell you that story here in just a little bit, but this whole chapter spoke to me. I kept nudging Brandon as I was reading it this week, and I was like, this is like our story. This is our story from moved from Kansas to Texas. Like, what? And I'll tell that here in a minute though. But we definitely had this faith test where it says we often discount what God is doing because we are so determined to go our own way. I was so determined and in my own way that sometimes I had a blinder on to what was ahead or what could be. And so, like Nikki in the book, they had found some property and she had found this house that she really liked, but it was way out of their community. And so she kind of just, discontinued that. Like her thought process was like, it's out of our way. It's out of our, community. I'm going to just forget about that. And so long story short, if you read this chapter, it was basically their dream house, their dream farm. And it was a little white house with black shutters. And I underlined that and put a heart and then put whoa. And then I said, tell my story. So when I'm gonna kind of go off the book because this is something that I connected to this book. But if you don't know our story from Kansas to Texas, we just moved 2 months ago from Kansas, and it was totally a God thing. A year ago, we were both we were doing that, discounting what God had planned for us. We were both like, not our time. We just both didn't feel it in our mind, in our hearts, to move to Texas. So we turned it down. We said, nope, no, thank you. We're just going to stay where we're at. I'm going to stay teaching. He's going to still do his job, blah, blah, blah. And so then a year later, we were here in College Station in Texas, and we were like, did we make the right decision? And we get back home, and 2 days later, Brandon gets a call from this job that he had interviewed here a year ago and turned down. And they wanted him to basically interview again. A year later, they remembered him after this one time of meeting him. And so he flies down here, interviews. And so then here comes the faith test. We're like, do we move to Texas? Do we leave everything we've ever known, our family, our friends, our lifestyle? We had just bought a house back home, We were redoing the kitchen. We were redoing everything. And we both just looked at each other and we're like, God, like, this has to be a God sign, right? And we definitely kind of played back and forth, like, is this the right thing? Is this going to be the right thing for our kids? And we just definitely took a leap of faith. And I feel like since we took that leap of faith, everything has kind of aligned. Now that we're here, the honeymoon phase is kind of over. Like, it felt like we were on vacation there for a month and a half, like, woohoo, like, knew everything. We got this at our fingertips. We've never even had a Walmart in our town, or, grocery store like Walmart or anything. So it's all been really cool. But the White House with the black shutters. So there's a story to that. So the house here that we bought, we're in an Airbnb right now for another 15 days. And then we get to move into our little white house with black shutters. And Chick-fil-A, I see Marissa saying Chick-fil-A. Yes, Chick-fil-A. But a little story on Rachel and Jill. Before we even bought our house here, we didn't fly down. We didn't come see it. They went house hunting for us, them two, and my brother-in-law. And we actually bought our house on FaceTime with them two and Eric, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, there. And it was a little white house with black shutters. So this chapter just literally gave me chills. And I'm like, this is our story. And so I just had to tell that. Sorry that took up so much time, but I love it. And this whole chapter I feel like goes back to that faith test. It goes back to the story. And I could relate so much with our move from Kansas to Texas. So I felt like it was no mistake that I'm doing chapter 2 as well for this book study. So we'll go on to page 24. So they found this house, this property, this farm, they went through a whole bunch of hurdles, like no's, like things that didn't work out. And it says, don't stop on 6. So after 6 days of circling the city one time, Joshua and his army had to march around the walls of Jericho 7 times in the 7th day. What if his army had stopped on the 6th and given up and gone home? I loved how she said, what if we would have quit? And they may have quit if they wouldn't have heard that verse, and I feel like that's the same for our story. We might have quit if we wouldn't have just given it all to God and said, let's just do it. Let's just trust, And so after a lot of prayer and consideration, same thing with us, they went for it. They went for that property. And, what did it say? But we had to be committed to the process. We accepted the assignment of refinement. And while quitting the stream was an option, and I circled that option, we knew there was more at stake. So we could have definitely thrown in the towel and said, I'm going to stay with the familiar. And there's more to that in this chapter, was fleeing too familiar. But there's just more at stake. There's more of an opportunity there. They saw potential in that property. It's not my favorite. So it goes on to say, of all the 5 habits, this might be your least favorite. It's my least favorite for sure. Not because this habit isn't a good one, but because this is the hardest habit to actually live out, which is why it might be the most important. So when I think about refinement, I think about how we respond to hard and messy. So a question I want to ask you guys is, how do you respond? How do you respond to hard and messy? You can type it in the chat. You can feel free to share, but how do you respond to hard and messy? Do you run? Do you shut down? Do you work harder? Do you go to God? Like, what do you guys do? I'm going to kind of open up the chat so I can read some of them. Or if you guys want to share, go
All
ahead.
of the above. I
All the
go
above.
through stages of all of the above. Yeah.
Same. I was definitely the same. There for a long time, I just shut down. And that's been another thing. I feel like God, with this move, really wanted to work on my marriage. And it's just been such a God thing where, not that we had a bad marriage, because we had a wonderful marriage, but we were very quick to get married. We didn't have a lot of us time, and then we had babies right away. And so I just feel like God is really working. He definitely worked through me first to get to my spouse, my husband. And now it's insane what he's doing in my husband's life. And I could go, that could be a whole nother Zoom in itself, but I can also thank Rachel for that too, for helping lead us to counseling and helping us, you know, just being able to communicate. That was just something we were lacking. I'm going to be honest here. That was something not that we were lacking, but we just didn't know how to do with each other, was communicate. So anyway, just shared that. But I believe how we walk through the assignment of refinement may determine our next assignment, which I thought was so big.
Yeah.
So it goes back to that leap of faith and us moving to Texas. What did I say? I'm ready for what's in store. I kept praying that I'm ready for what's in store. Seek me. What's the opportunity? I kept praying that over and over again. But I love how they said that. I believe how we walk through that assignment of refinement may determine our next assignment. So now that we, went through that assignment of refinement, we've gotten here to Texas, like, what is our next assignment? What's next? Like, I keep waiting for this huge thing to happen, and maybe it's not going to be a huge thing. Maybe it's our marriage, like what it's working with our marriage. Maybe it's, how we're growing as, friends and, our friendships and everything else. While it may seem our present circumstances are unfair, ridiculous, or even wrong, there's a perspective of coming glory. If we quit, we might miss the opportunity to see God work in and through a difficult situation. And I just wrote on there 27, that page is gold. That page is such gold. All right. Stay with God. Okay, so here's where it talked about the fleeing to familiar. So who flees to familiar when things get hard or messy? Raise your hand if you do. I was like that for so long. And I feel like, again, our move, and I'm talking about our move to Texas a lot, but I could have fled to that familiar. I could have stuck with what I was familiar with teaching, and my family was all there, and that's all I ever knew. And I didn't know a city. I knew a town. And a lot like Naomi and Ruth, and was it Orpah? I think that's her name. Orpah flees back to the familiar, in the book, but Ruth refuses to leave Naomi and takes this journey with her. And I just love how she spoke to Ruth spoke to Naomi and just said, I will go wherever you go. I will die where you die, and so forth. And her words were passionate, dramatic, and desperate. And she cares nothing about going back to her old ways, her old God, and her old family. She doesn't flee to familiar, but leans in and trusts. And so for me, that was just something that we really did. We leaned in and we trusted. So if y'all have a story or anything you guys chip into. Still on 29, or maybe with Naomi, just maybe, God had stirred something so big inside of Ruth, she can't bear the thought of not seeing it through to completion. So, she has this thought, or, this closeness to God that she just can't let go of, and she wants to see it through completion. So desperate situations will either lead us to a greater dependence on God, or they can cause us to detour away from God. And I definitely feel like, since we've been in Texas for the 2 months, I got baptized. It's been a year ago, a little over a year ago. And even since the move to Texas, like, I've leaned closer to God. I've leaned in closer to him, and I've had more of a dependence on him. And now it's showing through my kids as well. And I just made a post just a little bit ago about my son today on the way to school. He was like, Mom, put on that song. Ain't No Rock. And I'm like, okay. I knew exactly what he was talking about because we had just talked about this song or listened to this song at church not too long ago. And so I put it on, and he is singing it in the back of the car, and he's like, Mom, turn it up louder and start it over, please, and roll down my window when we got up to the school. And he wanted his teachers to hear that song. And I'm just like, oh, I love that. I just started like having tears in my eyes, because not only now is it, God working through us and our marriage and this move, but now it's working through our kids. He's working through our kids. And I just want them to have that relationship with him as well. On to page 30. She said, I get way too comfortable with the cycle of failure in my life. So she can just say, I failed. It's a new day. I'll start over. It's a new week. I can start over. It's a new month. I can start over. But so maybe I don't have enough desperation to really change, and we don't have forever to complete the God dreams and plans within us. But if we can learn anything from this part of Ruth's story, maybe it's just to stay with God. So even through your struggles, even through your quitting, even through, your failures and whatnot, maybe if anything you learn, just to stay with God through it all, and I love how Ruth does that in the book that Nikki's talking about. On page 31, this little thing, I just put hearts by, because I thought was so neat. It just says, stay with God when it's good. Stay with God when it's bad. Stay with God when it's easy. Stay with God when it's hard. Stay with God when you're confused. Stay with God when it's clear. Stay with God when you're lonely. Stay with God when your community is thriving. Stay with God when you want to quit. Stay with God when you're driven to succeed. Stay with God. And so I just took that as, staying with him even through the pretty and the ugly. And oftentimes it's in the valley, when he works the most, when you're having the hardest times, and you just lean in closer to him, that's ultimately what he wants, is that relationship with you. Before you move, hold on. So what did I say? I've been an orphan. Okay, so she said she's been confused, lost, and not sure how she could possibly stick out a hopeless situation, all because she chose to turn back around. But nothing can compare with what God is about to do through Naomi and Ruth. So if we move too quickly during assignments of refinement, we can miss what God has the power and the potential to do. The Bible doesn't tell us staying with God will allow things to turn out like we thought they should. However, it does say no matter what we go through, there is nothing but an unended grace from God. So I took this like with my homesickness. It's kind of starting to hit now. My marriage and then raising kids. I just kind of circled back to that. If we move too quickly during these assignments and what he's trying to do through all those things, we could really miss what the power and the potential is there that he is trying to work,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to read the chat too as I read some of this. When we stay with God, we stay with grace. I loved that. You guys have anything to share? I'm trying to read the chat as I kind of go through my notes. Okay. Thoughts, words, and actions. So I loved this about when she told her story about her 3 daughters, how they would come home from school with that womp womp mode. And I loved how she said, so we have a little saying in our house, when their stinking thinking starts to take over, thoughts become words, words become actions, and actions become reality. I loved that, the womp womp mode. Yeah. So talk positive to yourself and others. I kind of made little notes there. Talk positive to yourself and others, and talk good about your business, your marriage, your kids, your dreams, your friendships, anything. Just talk positively over that. And not everyone's perfect. I catch myself, and we're our worst critics too. We catch ourselves saying, oh, I hate how I look. Oh, if my nose was smaller. I used to say that all the time, but now I'm like, you know what? I love this nose. This is the nose that God gave me. But if we talk positive on ourselves, you just look at it as we are God's children. He created us perfectly, The last straw, or in his, not perfectly, he didn't create us perfectly, but he created us in his vision. Thoughts become words, words become actions, actions become reality. How does God feel? Okay, I just kind of hit on that. Thoughts are powerful when we are walking through refinement assignments. While we never are able to control all the events that happen or hard situations we find ourselves wandering through, we can control over our thoughts. So I loved that. Okay, making sure I'm still good on time. Understand. Okay, I think I went over that. Our thoughts become the words we speak. Another on page 36, it says, God is not a puppet master controlling our every move. The decision to stay with him through our thoughts, words, and actions will always be ours. So basically our choice to stay with him and to follow him and to lean on him, even through the hard, the messy, is always our choice. It's always our choice to lean into him more. And then lastly, before I kind of open it up to you guys and talk, and we get to chit chat some more, it says refine. Yeah. So refine. So again, it talks about, we're going to go back to that definition at the beginning of the book. So refinement means to improve and to touch up. So the first little block here they have in the book on page 37 is the word improve. So a question to ask yourself: rather than making me quit, how can this refinement assignment help me improve my character? So instead of being scared to move or quitting, how will I grow and what's the opportunity ahead is something that your mind can make that shift. That's my view on it. That was the question I asked myself. Rather than making me quit, how can this refinement assignment help me improve my character? So I just thought about my move to Texas and what was ahead. Why was God wanting us to move there? Why was he saying, we just kept feeling like he was saying to us, move, move, move. So what was ahead? Why was this move such an important thing? A thought to consider. It's important for us to have a healthy perspective on what in our lives need to be improved. We will never arrive at perfection. So I loved that, a thought to consider, which is so true, because if you're a perfectionist, which sometimes I try to be a perfectionist, we'll never arrive there. We'll never arrive there. So just accepting that we're going to fail and we're going to, have hard times, but not quitting on ourselves, and just getting right back up every single time is so important, and just moving on and leaning into him. I'm trying to read. That needs to be on repeat over and over. All right. Okay. And for women who have a tendency to quit, we have to be willing to look at the areas in our lives that need some improvement. Hard situations are a great place to see things in us that need to be changed. So here I challenge you to look at your life. Look at those hard places that you struggle maybe in your home. Maybe you struggle with parenting. Maybe you struggle in your marriage. I keep going back to marriage and kids and my business and moving, because that's just my life right now. So you guys can think about all of those hard situations in your life. But when do you have those tendencies to quit? When do you feel like quitting the most? I know working out, that's when I quit the most on myself. When things get hard, sometimes I want to quit. And I've been taught and raised to not be a quitter, and I won't quit on myself, and I push myself till I'm almost exhausted and dead and so forth before I will quit and take a break. But that's just me. And like Rachel said last week, I think she's like, I am not very good at accepting help. I'm just not. And that's me. I'm just not good at that. A verse to hold on to through this is, a man who endures trials is blessed, because when he passes the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. James 1:12. So I loved that. And now refinement, redefined word 2 was to touch up. A question to ask: do I need to quit this refinement assignment, or is there something I just need to touch up with a little more effort, grace, or understanding? So is there something you just need to tweak or change? Maybe it's how you talk to your spouse or talk to yourself, A thought to consider: goodness, what did she said? I mess up all the time. I say things I shouldn't say. I have thoughts I shouldn't have. I doubt myself when I should trust. I quit things I shouldn't quit. And yet God is always there, dabbing more and more grace into my soul. He doesn't quit on me. He just keeps touching up and places the weaknesses and the places of weakness in me, which I love. It's true. He's always right there. We all say things to ourselves that we shouldn't say, like we said before, or we say things about others, and that's not our place either. Okay, as we walk through assignment of refinement, there are times we just need to touch up a slight twist in our attitude or response. So I loved that too, just making a little twist in our response and attitude, and usually things can change for the better. And so then almost to the end, so it says it happened. So finally, that property, going back to that little white house with the black shutters, it happened. She walked in though to sign the papers, and she was really afraid. She immediately thought about quitting. She immediately thought this isn't going to happen. She had tears in her eyes. But she also really wanted to improve her thought process. And even she said in there, she got out a little quote or a verse and memorized that and started saying that. And before she knew it, the guy was smiling and saying, okay, it's just some paperwork that you need to do. So she kind of calmed down. What did I underline that I wanted to say? We didn't quit. We saw the whole thing through. And now we were holding the promise, the vision, the dream we dreamed. And so often I feel like too, if we quit too early, then you could quit on a dream that is ahead. If I would have quit a year ago on Plexus when I felt like quitting, when I got pregnant and I was sick to even look at a screen, and I was barely even re-ranking senior gold, and Marissa, Jill, Rachel, they could have let me quit, but they had belief in me when I didn't, and that's something I feel like we need to do as leaders and as people that follow God. When people feel like quitting on themselves in general, like, have their back, say, don't quit on, give them words of affirmation. Don't let them quit. Don't let them talk badly about themselves, and let them hold on to that dream, because now I have a dream that I would have never even dreamt a year ago, without the opportunity of Plexus. So, and even if you don't have Plexus in your life and you're on this book study, you have a dream, I'm sure, whether it's for you, your children, but hold on to that even when you do feel like quitting. But the assignment of refinement will typically catch us off guard. I loved that. So remember that when you're going through life. Usually whatever catches you off guard is probably going to be an assignment of refinement from the good old Lord. I loved that. So will you accept the assignment of refinement? I loved that. So I'm going to open up. We have like 2 minutes. If you guys want to share anything, I kind of talked a long time and I wanted you guys to be able to share, but there was a lot to cover in chapter 2, I felt like. So feel free to share or type in the chat if you wanted anything stood out to you. I'm really loving this book. It's amazing. I'm so glad we chose to do it. I'm glad we chose to do it slow. This is definitely more my speed when it comes to books. I never was a reader. My teacher in first grade hated me because I could not read in first grade. I still am not a very good reader. I have to read things over and over and over and over to even comprehend them. But underlining and highlighting and getting out of my comfort zone and not quitting on myself and doing these calls definitely helps me, live that dream that I want to dream someday. You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, you guys are more than welcome to hop off if no one wants to share anything and get to live. I know some ladies are headed to Hawaii tomorrow, so they've got a big evening and lots of cuddles and kisses and sleep to have.
Yeah. Well, I just appreciate this, Kelsey. You really opened up my mind to a lot of things. I read this, but I read it last week, and it's been real crazy with the sick grandbaby. Yes. And it just kind of made me start thinking about areas that I definitely need to work on.
Yeah, same. And we all have those areas. Every single one of us have areas that we need to work on.
Yeah.
we're never arrived at perfect. I loved how they said that, you know.
Yeah.
We all have our flaws, and a lot of times it's not out there to the public, you know, and I challenge you to share that. If you are sharing, if you're plexus or not plexus, share those struggles, share those, you know, with others, because then they can relate to you, you know, and maybe it opens up a relationship that someone really needs. So,
True.
all right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get off, guys. I hope you guys have a good evening. And if you want to hop over to our opportunity event that is on right now. Bye,
Okay,
guys.
thank you. Bye.
Bye.